What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So the last poll right before the California primary just came out. We're going to take a look at it, and we're going to be focused on the governor's race. We're going to take a look at the polling. We'll take a look at the early vote count so far. We have all of that information, so we're going to do all of that in this video. But first off, if you guys can do me a favor, please like the video. And if you're watching this video and you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to go right over. I just have a lot of information to go over today, so I want to make sure we get this in. And so this is the Emerson College poll. This is the poll that we were waiting for. Okay, so this is the final poll. And this poll is a really solid poll. I'll show you all of the information. If we look, and we can look at it right now. So if we're looking at, this was conducted between May 27th and May 28th. This was 1,000 voters. And I believe it's likely voters. California, likely voters. So it has a good sample size there. They're likely voters. So that likely voters are the best people to poll because likely voters have voted in recent elections. Sometimes you will see registered voters, or they'll just say adults. If it's registered voters, that just means that you were registered to vote. You might not have ever voted before, but you're registered to vote. And then when they poll just adults, it's just adults. You don't know if they're likely voters, registered voters. They just say adults. So in this case, they are specifying likely voters, so that is good. And we're looking at a margin of error of plus or minus 3%, which is where you want to be. So you want to be 3% or less when we're looking at these polls. Okay, so what I want to focus on is we'll look at the top line numbers first. And looking at the top line numbers, we do have a change here. So Becerra was in the lead in the latest poll that we saw. But in this poll, Becerra is at 28%. We have Tom Steyer. Okay, so Tom Steyer has now moved into second place. Tom Steyer is at 22%. We have Hilton at 21%. You have Bianco at 12%. Look at Katie Porter. She's dropped here. So Katie Porter is at 5%. Mehan is at 5%. Villaragosa is at 2%, and then Thurman is at 1%, someone else is at 1%, and then undecided. You see the undecideds here. This has changed a lot. So it was in the double digits before. Now we're down to 5%, which means that we have voters that have decided who they're voting for. And it looks like the bulk of the undecideds are going to Becerra, and then we have some going to Steyer. Okay, that's what we're seeing here. When it comes to Hilton, you might have a few going to Hilton, but Bianco, not very much. And we'll go down. They'll show us more information there. I think Bianco only, his numbers increased by like 1%. So this is what we're looking at here. So you have Tom Steyer and you have Becerra 1 and 2. If we were to see a scenario like that, you would have both Democrats on the top. So you would have a runoff between Becerra and Tom Steyer. Now, in past polls, we saw Hilton number 1, we saw Becerra number 2, we saw Steyer down there 2 or 3, and so now we've seen a shift. We've seen a major shift, and so I want to take a look because they go over. Emerson goes over basically what we've seen, what's transpired over since September of 2025. And so if we go back to September of 2025, and you see the colors here, so they have a color coded, so this lighter purple, and then it gets darker as we move closer and closer to the present time. So if we look at Becerra, back in September, Becerra was at 5%. Okay, and then when we go into October, Becerra was at 5%. And then they skip ahead to December, Becerra was at 4%. February, Becerra was at 4%. And then March, Becerra was at 3%. So you see, look at where Becerra was, and this was all before the Swalwell incident. When Swalwell dropped out, then we started to see a shift. And so when we moved into April, you see Becerra moved up to 10%. And then we moved into May, and Becerra was at 19%. And now at the end of May, we're looking at Becerra at 28%. And then look at Steyer's trajectory. So he started at 4%. That was back in September. And then he moved up in October and then December. And then into 2026, we continue to see him move up. And now he's at 22%. Look at Hilton. Hilton was at 10% back in September, and then we move forward 16%. So Hilton has kind of been going up and down, up and down. And then in April and May, he kind of flatlined there at 17%, and now he is peaking at 21%. Looking at Bianco, Bianco started at 8% and really hasn't changed very much. 11%, 13%, 14%, 11%, 14%, 11%. Now he's at 12%. Looking at Porter, look at what happened with Porter. Porter started at 16% back in September, and she's gone down since then. And then in April and May, she was at 10%, and now she's dropped off to 5% in late May. Looking at the undecideds, and this is what, I mean, when I was talking about Becerra, this is where Becerra is getting a lot of his votes. He's getting some votes from Swalwell, but he's also getting votes from the undecided. They're now deciding. So we saw undecideds at 38%, 39%. This is what we were looking at back then. And then it went down to 31%, 21%, and now it's down to 5%. And so what we're seeing this excess of undecideds here. They're now looking at Becerra. They're now looking at Tom Steyer. And then some of them are now looking at Hilton. And then you have like maybe 1% that's looking at Bianco. And so that is what we're looking at with the current polling coming from Emerson. Now, Emerson is a very good pollster. And so I would anticipate that this information is going to be, it could be pretty close. We could see either Becerra versus Hilton or Becerra versus Steyer. That's probably what we're going to see. I can't see Bianco jumping into the number 2 spot. It's possible, but I just don't see it now. Just looking at the latest polling, not even just looking at Emerson, but looking at some of the overall polls, we're not seeing Bianco consistently in that second spot. And so it looks like right now it's going to be a race between 3. It's going to be a race between Steyer, Hilton, and Becerra. Now I want to take a look at the ballots that have already been cast. Now this is very important, okay? And we're using PDI. That's where we're getting this information from. And there's about 13%. So if we zoom in here, there's about 13% that have reported, okay? So total ballots, 23,146,420. Returned ballots, you have 3,047,137. And remember, in California, they send out ballots to everyone. So the ballots that have not been returned, we have 20,099,283. Okay, now let's look at the breakdown here. When we're looking at Democrats right now, the ballots that they've returned, 1,382,073. When it comes to Republicans, 1,034,298. And then when we have other, we have 630,758. Now looking over here, you see what it says here. It says return, and then it says registered. What this is telling us, Democrats right now, the registration for Democrats in California is 45%. So the ballots that have been returned so far is 46%. So they're at about the norm here. When we're looking at registered voters to how many ballots have been returned, it's about the same. But look at what's happening with Republicans. Registered voters, 25%. So 25% of the population are registered Republicans. They are outperforming right now. They've returned 34%. Okay, so early voting, and this is just early voting. That's what we're talking about here. So early voting is showing that Republicans are voting at a higher percentage than the registered Republican voters in California. We have registered voters at 31%, and the ballots that have been returned is 21%. And so in the other category, we're seeing underrepresentation. So overrepresentation when it comes to Republicans, underrepresentation when it comes to others. And then the ratio when it comes to Democrats, it's about the same, 46% to 45% registered. Now, when we break this down to gender, we're looking at male voters or male ballots that have been cast. You have 1,445,076. Female ballots that have been cast, you have 1,494,704. And then unknown here, I don't know if that's 10. It's got to be more than 10, but I think maybe it cut off there. But let's go ahead and look at the return and then registered voters. So let's look at this again. So the returned, we're at 48%. This is when it comes to males. And then 47% of the population are males. When we're looking at females, we have 50% and 49%. So it's pretty much, it's the norm. We're not really seeing a big outperformance or underperformance when it comes to those two categories. Okay, now let's look at the breakdown when it comes to age. So when we're looking at age, ballots that have been cast, 65 plus, you have 1,633,500. We're looking at the age between 50 and 64. You have 682,843. We're looking at ages between 35 and 49, 427,866. And then we're looking at the age between 18 and 34. You have 302,000 I will just say 302,900. I can't see the rest there. And then we're looking at returns versus registration. You have 54% of the 65 plus have returned their ballots. And so we have an outperformance here because they only make up 26% of the voter pool. Okay, looking at the between 50 and 64, that's pretty much that is dead even, 23%, 23%. And then when we're looking at between 35 and 49, we have 15% return, 25% registered. So they're underperforming here, this age group here, 35 to 49. And then looking at 18 to 34, you have 10% have returned their ballots, and we're looking at 28% of the voter pool. And so this group would also be underperforming. Okay, now let's look at ethnicity. So when we're looking at white or other, we have 1,523,193. Looking at Latino, we have 527,641. Looking at Asian, we have 325,329. And then we're looking at African American, it just says 10. I don't know why it's saying 10. I'll have to look more into that. I'll come back and maybe put it in the comments. If you guys see in the comments, maybe I'll explain that. But obviously that number is going to be higher than what it's showing here, but maybe they just don't have that information recorded. Okay, so looking at the return versus registration, you have return 62%, registration 57%. Looking at a return for Latinos, you have 22% returned, 29% registered, so a little bit of underperformance there. Right here, I would say this is kind of, I mean, it's overperformance, but not by much, okay, when we're talking about white or other. Looking at Asian, we have 14% return, 11% registered, so they're outperforming just a little bit. And then African American, if we just want to look at the numbers here, it's showing us 5% return, and we have 4% registered, so they would be outperforming just a little bit as well. And so I just wanted to give you a little more detail when it comes to the final poll right before the California primary. We will be covering this live. We'll be covering it live on Tuesday, so make sure you stop by. And the best way to be notified is if you subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell notification. You're going to get a notification. I will be posting a notification later today. But now I want to hand it off to you. What do you think we're going to see in this primary, this governor's race? Do you think we're going to be looking at Becerra versus Steyer, Becerra versus Hilton? None of the top three, and we'll see someone else, Bianco versus Porter, or Bianco versus Hilton, or Bianco versus Becerra. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye. So that's all we have for this video. Make sure if you guys want to send me an email, you can do that, david@thetecshow.com. Like the video, subscribe for more, and check out these videos over here for some more great content. Talk to you later. Bye.